Welcome to the Been There, Lost Fat podcast, real education and advice from people who get it. We've been there, lost fat, and successfully helped many others in doing so. I'm Sarah Fuchinari, an integrative health practitioner, certified nutrition coach, and head coach of Team Fit With Me. And I've been having my co-host be my husband that I keep saying I'm here with my partner in business and life. But Jess is back, and she's also kind of my... Jess, welcome back.
Thank you. I appreciate that Mark was able to step in and keep the seat warm. But yeah, I'm back.
Now we're gonna have to do a pod with all three of us. That would be a riot.
Yes.
You guys don't know this yet, but Jess and Mark have like an ongoing thread of just fuckery, and they are so funny. They like make GIFs and memes, and they do all this weird shit. So we'll have to do one.
Absolutely. Yes.
We also have another great guest. We've been like cranking out the guests lately. But I actually spoke with this guest last week with no intent of us podding. And like 5 minutes into our conversation, I was like, we have to get on a pod together. So Shea, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. I love that. I love, I'm learning different like terms different podcasters are using. I like that podding. That's cute. I like that.
Well,
I'm gonna have to use that.
Jess and I have been, how long have we been together now, Jess? 5 years?
Almost 5 years. Yes.
5 years of daily back and forth. So we've come up with lots of isms.
I love it. I love it. No, yeah. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to just get to know you guys better and just kind of, I feel like whenever I do these interviews or podcasts, it's fun just to be part of like a new community, and it's really fun.
Well, and what I'm really excited about is that Jess and I, so spoiler alert, Shea has had bariatric surgery. But Jess and I are kind of like the OG old school, like we're at a totally different place of bariatric surgery. And so I think it'll be really cool for us to talk about kind of what we're going to talk about your whole journey, but to compare how different our experiences are, and the resources are totally different that are available to you.
Yes, I know. I have several friends who are kind of more in that generation. I don't know if that's the right word, but who, had bariatric surgery when, Instagram wasn't what it was now and social media wasn't what it was. And yeah, it was kind of like more of the Wild West for you guys, not having as many people sharing their stories. And that's why I'm just so passionate about sharing my story, because that's what I was looking for when I was looking into surgery is, what is this about? I was looking for people who were younger who had surgery because I was having a difficult time finding, what their outcomes were. And so, yeah, I feel very lucky for the timing for me of when I had my surgery, being kind of more in the social media age. It's been really cool.
I think Jess and I were in that, just like nobody knew what the fuck they were doing. And so we all kind of banded together to be like, What are you doing? What are you doing? Jess, remind me, are you like a decade out now?
I will be a decade out this September.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Back in that space, in that time, I was looking at people's like blogs to find out, what was going on with weight loss surgery. So it wasn't even like Instagram yet. That was like the newer thing. And I've had my account for probably 11 years now to like track my like progress and whatever else. So yeah, it was blog posts that we were looking into a decade ago.
I'm laughing over here thinking like Jess is on MySpace learning about my bariatric surgery.
Basically.
Well, that's actually how I met Jess. Is I was following her, and I think it was when you were about to have Logan, and like Nicole reached out about like baby shower stuff, something. Nicole, who's now a longtime client, and it was something baby related. And then I posted about, we had a 6 foot long snake that lived under my porch.
Oh my gosh.
Colorado.
Hillary.
I posted about Hillary the snake, and Jess was like, oh, hell no. And I was like, oh my God, this person with all these followers wants to talk to me. And then we were friends, like fast friends in a couple of months. So, and obviously ever since.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's so cool.
Shea, can you tell us a little bit about your journey before weight loss surgery?
Yeah, you bet. So, growing up as like a kiddo, I've always had excess weight. I've always been kind of like on the larger side of that. In middle school and high school, looking back now, and I've talked with other people who will say similar things, but it's like I wasn't I didn't have that much excess weight, but I think, just the environment that high school breeds, it's like I was always on a diet, always trying to figure out like how to lose weight. And I just wasn't taught like what nutrition was, what macros were. Like I didn't know anything about that. And so I was always trying to spin my wheels, even, like I remember in high school, going, okay, I'm going to try this diet or, trying these different foods to see if it works, not having any concept of what it looked like to just nourish my body. Like that was something that I felt like was never taught to me in that type of way. And so, fast forward a little bit, I got married when I was 21, and me and my husband wanted to start conceiving and having kids about like three or 4 years after we got married. I had been on birth control since I had gotten married, pretty much a little bit before then. And so my cycles had never been regular, and going off of birth control really revealed that of like, oh my gosh, what is my body trying to do? I'm not having normal periods. And we tried to conceive for a couple years, and it just wasn't happening. And so I got formally diagnosed with PCOS, or polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I feel like that was really the kickoff of learning about my body and learning about nutrition and hormones and things that I get so fired up and passionate about, because it's like, why was I not taught this in school or just by anybody? Like it's such an important part of being a woman is knowing that. And it's always been something that's been very much like shamed or just not talked about or given proper information, at least how I grew up. And so during that time is when I learned a lot more. I started working with a nutrition coach, and she taught me about macros and learning, about what protein, carbs, and fats are. I know you guys do a lot of macro work as well. And so that was really helpful just to know, oh, like I am like severely under eating, undernourishing my body. And this is like what I really should be consuming. And it's not, just celery juice and, all of the diety things that I was trying to do up to that point. And so that was really cool in that season, because I just learned more about that. I got my period back. I hadn't had my period for like, I think 1 or 2 years after having birth control, or it was like very hit or miss. But then I started consistently having it after I just started nourishing my body properly. And then it got to the point where I was just so frustrated because I had been doing everything that I know I should have been doing, as far as like eating enough for my body, eating the right foods, eating the right amount, moving my body. And I was so frustrated that I still had excess weight that I could just not lose no matter what I did. And so my mother-in-law actually had bariatric surgery. And so seeing her through that process kind of got me thinking about it. And then she was the one who actually had said like, hey, have you seen this research on conception rates and how bariatric surgery can actually help with conception? And I was like, no, I haven't. So I looked into that a bit more, and I was like, okay. And then looking at all of the risk factors of where I was at before, I had a higher risk for, gestational diabetes, just having my body hurt with being pregnant, just a lot of things. I was in a much higher risk category before having surgery, and then looking at the risks after surgery that were potentially there. Sorry.
Oh,
My doggy's got in the background.
Okay. Mine is going to go next.
I know it's going to be
in our last podcast, my bird was going crazy because he really likes the southern. So I have a parrot. He really likes the southern accent of our.
Oh, does he? Oh my gosh, that's so cute.
Sorry, continue.
Oh no, I know. I'm like, sorry. Hopefully the dog loop won't start.
We get it.
Okay, good. But yeah, and so after just looking at the research a bit more and kind of the risk factors, if I didn't get surgery, it was like, this seems like a really good option to look into. And so that's kind of catches us up until surgery of making that decision. And I was 27 at that point when I decided, yep, I don't want to do this back and forth and round. I want to do something that really helps treat my obesity. And I think seeing obesity as a disease, I had never been taught that either. And so kind of understanding that a bit more, it was like, oh, this is a disease that needs treatment. What are those treatment options? And bariatric surgery is one out of many treatment options. And that was just the right fit for me. So that kind of gets us up to that point right before surgery.
So I have to say that I hate when people say obesity is a disease.
Oh, really?
And I hate it specifically in our community because I often hear it followed up with it's incurable. And I think that if we look at like the definition, that I agree. I have that disease as well. But the part that I don't like in our community specifically is that I feel like people often follow it up with it's incurable and that it turns into it. And for a lot of us, for most of us, for all three of us sitting here and thousands of other people, millions probably, you have to try a lot of different routes to get where you want to go. It's really rare that somebody just says, hey, I'm going to lose weight. And it just happens on your first attempt. It's not a thing. But anytime, it's so funny because when we spoke last week, you had said that, and I'm not giving you any beef. But in our community specifically, when that term is thrown around, my hackles always kind of get up, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, like specifically in our community, because I don't know if you've heard the things that I have.
Yeah, I guess I always look at it. I think rarely things are black and white. And so I don't tend to see things in that way, or I try not to see things in that way. And so I think saying that obesity is a disease and there's nothing that you can do to help with it, I feel like I don't agree with that. I think a lot of things contribute. But I think what was helpful for me in learning that is I was just able to see it differently of like, oh, it just clicked differently in my mind of like, this isn't because I don't have willpower or I'm not capable. It's because I have like the cards stacked against me. So it's not that that's going to put me in like a victim mentality of like, oh, I just have the disease of obesity. So like there's no helping, but it gives me more tools to go, oh, okay. So if this is a disease I have, what can I do to help with that? There's bariatric surgery. I've heard lots of good things about GLP-1 medications. But of course, there's also what we put into our bodies, our stress levels, how our mental and emotional health is. Are we moving our bodies? Like all of those things contribute. So I think if you don't have that full picture and you're just like, oh, obesity is a disease and like, I can't do anything about it. I don't agree with that, but I think it's a very complex disease with a lot of different factors that contribute. And if we're only paying attention to one of those factors, that's not going to be very helpful. If we're only paying attention to nutrition, but we're totally not paying attention to our stress levels, our mental and emotional well-being, that's not going to be helpful, just like, vice versa. And so it's definitely more of a holistic thing. But again, you look at the society we live in and how modern medicine is, it tends to approach things in that way of there's this disease, I have this treatment plan, A plus B equals C. And that's just not how like human beings work. So it makes sense why people, I think, see things in those ways, but I try to see it more from like a holistic perspective. And so I don't know how other people mean it when they say it, but that's, I guess, like how I mean it when I say it, where it's like, I just wish that somebody would have told me that sooner so I could have had more information and language so I could have advocated for myself sooner. So that's like how I see it, I guess.
I'm 1000% with you.
Yeah.
Very on brand, but you and I had a long conversation and I knew that we were very aligned on that. But I do find that term sometimes can be so misused, which is why I wanted you to further explain. I was talking with our nurse Lane this morning and she said, I'm so happy to be in the business of healthcare now, where I've spent so much of my life in the business of sick care.
Yes.
And of just treating things kind of backwards. And I think that, if we do have a diagnosis of any kind, that it can be a reason or it can be an excuse. And come on, ladies, let's use it as a reason because it's worth it.
Well, and another perfect example, I got diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, or ADD, which tends to be a very common overlap I've noticed in the club. Yeah. As the bird flies by. I love that.
He is also ADD.
Yes. But I love that as an example too, where it's like, that's not part of like who I am. That's not my identity, but it's so helpful to have that language of like, oh, that's why my brain works this way. And here are different coping strategies and tools I can use to help with that. But it doesn't have to be like, oh, I just have ADD, so I can never focus on anything or never do anything. It's like, no, it just helps me understand myself more so I can, work more efficiently and better. And so I don't think any diagnosis, at least for me, I never want to have a diagnosis define who I am or be, part of my identity. It just gives me more language to advocate for myself better and learn more about myself, really.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, you are just so eloquent.
Oh, thank you.
You does it all so well.
It's because I have my ADD meds and they haven't worn off yet.
Oh,
so if
girl.
you got me in the afternoon, I'd be a little more squirrely.
I took myself off Adderall
Did you?
several months ago, and I went into full withdrawal. It was like messed up, and I did it the wrong way. Like I
cold turkey.
I was just like, I'm gonna be done with this. And I did it like with caffeine and like I did everything at once. And I full on was like having like shaking, sweating. It was terrible, and I was like, I should probably talk to my doctor before I start doing things like this again.
Definitely, yes. No, definitely. There's other ways to do it where it's a little bit better.
Don't follow my advice on that, guys. Something that you had said to me when we spoke last week was that you had done a lot of the mental work before you had surgery. And I think it's really relevant to whether you're having surgery or whether you're starting any kind of weight loss journey or any kind of change in your life to do that mindset work. I did not do that, and it kicked me in the ass really hard several years later. Jess, thoughts on that? Did you do any kind of like mindset work before you got surgery?
I had to go through a full like therapy situation before I could even get it approved through my insurance. So that was part of their like onboarding process to be approved for the surgery. There was like a 6-month whole process. So I did some of that, but continued afterwards to do more and realize that the work that I had done prior barely scratched the surface of what was really needed. I think I got into it for a lot of the same reasons that Shea was talking about. I was worried about conception and trying to, get ahead of diseases and things. And so I think I was really focused more on the physical and the health reasons versus like the mental health reasons. But I think that I still continue to do that work even now, a decade later. I don't think that work ever really stops.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Can you share a little bit about kind of like what you did to prepare and what worked for you?
Yeah. Well, I feel like a lot of it started when I was in college. I was initially going to school to be a nurse. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And then I had my first anatomy and physiology class with a cadaver. And I'm like, I don't know about this. I don't know if this is for me. And I had already planned on getting my minor in psychology. And so at that time, I was like, I'm just going to change my major. I got an opportunity at that point to work full time for a healthcare company. And I was like, it'll be easier to do something like psych versus a nursing degree, just because it's more extensive in the nursing degree in different ways. And so I changed my major, and then that's when I just I feel like came alive, where I'm like, oh, this stuff is so cool. Like, it was just so fascinating that all of these things that I had experienced, trauma in my life, things, the way that I approached situations, it's like, whoa, there's names for these. There's reasons why I do the way I do. And so that was where I really feel like a lot of my internal self-growth started in that realm of more of that mental and emotional workings. And then after I graduated college, I went and got my master's degree in psychology as well, learned more in that realm. But so that's kind of where it started. In that time, I also went to therapy for the first time. I hadn't ever been to a therapist, but it was actually in college. It was a therapy student who I got to go to see for free sessions. And that was my first introduction into therapy. And I'm like, oh, this is really helpful. Just being able to talk to someone else who doesn't know anything about me. I had a really good first experience. And so over the years, I, have seen lots of different therapists in that time, learned more about myself, but then really learning about adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. That was really helpful in my journey of just learning more about how trauma that you experience as a kid translates into adulthood. And it's like, oh, when I get those triggers or I lash out in these ways that are unexpected, it's not because I'm this loony bin psychopath. It's like there's a lot of really valid reasons why those triggers produce those responses. And so learning more about that was really helpful. And so I would say, like, prior to surgery, I had done a lot of that work of like knowing what my childhood traumas were, working through those, kind of starting to work through different relational aspects with different people, with family of origin people, and going like, okay, how do I want them to relate in my life, and how do I approach them, and just kind of figuring that out. But then after having surgery, it was like I just had this immediate mind-body connection that was very intense and kind of unexpected. And I could relate a lot to what you were saying, Jess, of like, I think so much of my brain's capacity was taken up by physical health for such a long time, of like focusing on what diet I was going to be on, how to get my periods back, how to conceive. And then once I had surgery, it's like I didn't have to worry about those things in that same type of way anymore, because it was such a drastic change where it's like, okay, physically I'm starting to see these changes in my body, and it's happening more naturally than it had in the past. And so then it was like all of this capacity opened up for all these mental and emotional issues that I really needed to sort through. And it happened all at once for me. That was just my experience. So it's been lots of therapy individually. It's been lots of couples therapy with me and my husband. And I feel like I've had probably like 10 years worth of growth in like a 2-year period, just because it's been a very intense time of exploring that. So I'm sorry, I don't remember what question. I kind of got off on a tangent a little bit with that, but I think that kind of answered that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it did.
Yeah.
You can go on any tangents that you want here.
Okay, cool. Well, now that I know we have other ADDers, then I'm like, okay, yeah, you guys will follow.
Yeah, me and Jess's chat every day. It's all over the place.
I love it.
So when did you have surgery? Remind me?
Yeah, so I had surgery March of 2022. Okay. So it's been just a little over 2 years now. I've lost about 100 pounds. I've regained a little bit of that back since that time, but overall I feel really good. Like I think I had like some misconceptions going into surgery of thinking like, oh, people have surgery like just so they eat less and lose weight. It's like there's so much more involved in that, of it just changes all of your hormones and your metabolism. And that's kind of the biggest thing that I noticed after having surgery. I got off my thyroid meds for a while. I ended up going back on those more recently, but my hormones leveled out. I have like regular cycles now, which is so exciting. Like I get so excited about that. And so it's just been really cool to see a lot of those health benefits emerge from having the surgery. I don't have sleep apnea anymore. All my blood levels are just phenomenal now. And so it's really cool because like right after surgery, there's a period of time where it's like, I almost felt like a newborn baby, learning how to drink again, eat again. But now being 2 years out, I feel it feels a lot more normal now, where I'm eating enough food to like support my body, where it's not like that 8 or 1,200 calories a day. Like, and that's what I think. I get so sad when I hear people talk about that who are several years out and they're still eating, like that. And it's not, I hope this doesn't come across in like a judgmental way at all, because that's not how I'm intending it, but it's more of like, man, like I just, if I could not function off of 800 calories a day, like I would just be, I would be,
not optimally.
No, I would be a wreck and so like hangry all the time. And so it's cool being more in a maintenance season of where I'm learning more about fitness and kind of moving my body and eating to support my body in that way. And then haven't conceived yet, but I just really feel like when it's supposed to happen, it will. And I think a lot it's been a stressful couple of years where I think that's played a role in it too, of just, dealing with different like family dynamics, dealing with learning who I am as a person, that I feel like I'm kind of entering into a season now of more like peace and calm, and kind of, I've just felt more like nesty lately of just wanting to be home. And so I think that over time, like that'll happen when it's supposed to, but yeah, so that's kind of where things are at present day.
You had the sleeve, right? You didn't have bypass?
Yeah, I had the sleeve. And that was one of the decision, or why I made that decision, was because of my conception goals of like, it just felt better to me knowing that, okay, my stomach could stretch out a bit more and I could hold more food when it came to like pregnancy, breastfeeding. And then also it's nice to know as an option where I could get a revision down the line if I wanted or needed to bypass if I wanted later on. But yeah, the sleeve has been great so far. So
I had both of my pregnancies after my revision to bypass.
Oh, did you? That's awesome.
Yep. Not that we were really trying before that, but I did have both of my pregnancies after a revision from sleeve to bypass. So with the extra small tummy, and I have two very, very healthy boys that got everything that they needed and all of that. So
yeah, and the research
always happy to talk about bariatric pregnancy.
Yes, no, that's so good to know. And I want to clarify too. The research has shown that after bypass, you can have really healthy pregnancies too. It's when I was just looking at like the difference between the twos, there is a higher chance of like malabsorption in nutrition, but that doesn't mean that that will happen. But that's the only reason. But I know there can be lots of healthy pregnancies with bypass too.
I had to have iron infusions after both pregnancies, B12 shots. But I had to have some interventions with my levels and things, because they will take everything. They will take every little bit of everything.
They're little parasites.
I called Logan my little tapeworm when I was pregnant, and I meant it.
I love it.
So we had surgery 2020. Wait, what? I'm like, what year is it right now?
I know, 2022. Yeah, so like, 2 years ago.
Look at my computer, like, what year is it?
Where are we?
Bad things are right now. No, things aren't bad. I'm just a moron when it comes to like, I am that person that this is bad. I don't know if this is ADD or if this is just me. I can't remember my zip code, my address a lot of the times. But if I'm getting gas at the gas station, I like have to call my husband and ask him what the zip code is. And that is not, and we've lived here for 3 years. It's not normal. But number stuff, like, it just, my brain doesn't connect it for some reason.
Yeah, no, I've heard that with different people too, or I have different things like that too. Or I know people where it's like the left and right, they have a difficult time of like knowing, like they don't automatically know which is left or right. They have to really think about it. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of that, what do they call it? Like neurospicy, the neurodiversity.
My therapist or my psych calls it on the spectrum, but we decided there's no reason to get tested.
Yeah, exactly.
So did you have any complications with healing or any, like, what was your healing process like?
Yeah, I feel really lucky. Like I did not have any complications. The only thing that I had after surgery, so like everything as far as like the surgery itself went really, really well. Didn't have anything with that. After surgery though, I did experience like quite a bit of excess bleeding, like vaginal bleeding. Okay. And that was something that kind of freaked me out because I hadn't heard anybody talk about it. But I was working with like my doctor and my physical therapist to help kind of understand a bit more why. And again, I think it's something that's not talked about, especially with hormones. Again, I'm not a doctor. This is just research and hypotheses I've done based on my own body and my own research for myself. But I think what was happening is I tended to lose, or I lost most of my weight in the beginning around like my hips and thighs and butt. And I think what happened was I just had this excess estrogen that kind of released from my fat cells and needed to get out some way. Cause that was something I didn't understand either, is that like with fat cells, they don't go away unless you like lipo them out, but they just shrink and expand. And so I think it correlated to where as I was losing weight in the spaces that I had the majority of my fat cells, that's when I had a lot of excess bleeding. So that was about like for the first 3 months or so, I had pretty heavy bleeding like almost every day with like little breaks in between. And like I said, I was talking with my doctor about it and I was like getting medical support, but I just felt like that was something that wasn't talked about. But then after that cleared up, everything kind of seemed to go back to normal. I had regular cycles for the first time, which was really cool, but it was almost just like an estrogen dumping process that I think it was, but I don't know that for sure.
With
That was the
PCOS,
only
you
thing.
definitely have extra.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, get it out.
What I think is so cool about your story, which is, I want to say it's like probably the first person I've heard, is that you were pretty educated on what you needed to do beforehand. And I always say, like, it's funny you brought up earlier that, they don't teach nutrition in school. Like, how fucked up is that? That
It's so horrible.
They can't even tell us to feed our own body, something that we have to do multiple times a day. We have one of those. I don't know if you guys ever play those games that are like question prompts. We do them with our friends all the time. There's one of them that said, like, if there could be one school subject that you would have, and I'm always like, nutrition. It's ridiculous that we don't know how to feed our bodies.
Yeah, well, and it's like I took like a nutrition class in college, but it wasn't like teaching you how to feed your body. It was like all of the like molecular cells, and it's like that's cool too to learn, but if you're not going to be like a dietitian or that doesn't interest you, like we need like base level how to feed ourselves, and then also finance too. Like that's something I was not taught and had to learn, like debt and income and how all that works together. And so yeah, I get passionate about that because I'm like, why weren't we taught that? That's such a fundamental part of life. Like, but yet we had to sit through algebra and like all this other crap that we don't use at all. So that's not cool.
I could write out some pretty cool shit on the calculator though.
Yeah, right. Boobless.
But I find that there's so many people that feel like you said earlier, that it's a willpower issue or that their body just doesn't work or something like that. There's something that and I felt like when I started having issues with post surgery, I had surgery. I found myself like 9-10 months later eating 800 calories a day because that's what my surgeon told me to do.
Right.
Exercising for 2 hours a day. And I listen, I think that our surgeons are great at giving us what we need for healing.
Yes.
But I am yet to see any bariatric, and I work with hundreds of bariatric patients, and I'm excited for the day I see one. I'm yet to see somebody actually provide the information that we need post healing, and then learning how to start feeding ourselves properly for the long term. I think it's a huge reason why there's regain, and there's a huge reason why there's a lot of revisions that maybe. And I'm not a doctor either, but there are a lot of these things that can be prevented, and that we can set people up for success. And I often will have people come to me and say, I know what to do, I'm just not doing it. And okay, sure. So you want to hire me for accountability. That's great. You check in every week. That's awesome. But I'm yet to have somebody that like actually, because if you know how to do it, that means that you also know how to be flexible.
Yeah.
So that you can be consistent, because we're not going to be perfect all the time. We're not going to execute plan A all the time. We need to have plan B through Z. And literally, I call my nutrition programming nutrition. What do you call them, Jess? What did you put? Nutrition style A to Z plans.
A to Z plans. Yeah.
That's literally what we call them, because it's important to have that flexibility.
Well, and I think that's like the biggest lie that I feel like I got told to, or I don't know where it came in or how it's been there, but it's like, yeah, I know what to do, I'm just not doing it. But that's such a good point, where it's like, as I'm branching out into more fitness and educating myself more in that area, I have a trainer and somebody who's helping me with that. It's like, I'll talk with her and I'm like, oh, I totally thought I knew what I was doing. I was totally doing it wrong. And like, I had no idea. And so I think that's been like the biggest key in this whole journey, is just going, oh, I actually don't know a lot, and that's okay. It's not something to have shame about or like be, embarrassed about. It's like, oh, I really don't know a lot of this stuff, and who can I like reach out to get support? And I think when you start doing that and not having shame around that, it's like, oh, it's not because I didn't have lack of willpower. It probably is because I really didn't know certain information or pieces, like key pieces of that information. We might know kind of a bird's eye view, but we don't know the details in between that make up the difference with that, So I just resonated a lot when you said that. I'm like, yeah, I thought I knew a lot until I realized, oh, I don't know a lot.
Well, something I always say is that there's nothing intuitive about this lifestyle.
Yeah.
Unless somebody has taught you how to do it, you would not know how to do it. And I think people get so scared, like asking for help, And I get like that too, because I'm very like, I can do everything type of girl. But I've been going through some stuff with my health, and I'm in a position that I'm ready to like dial it in and take it to the next level. And I just hired a coach. And,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm not ashamed of that at all. Coaches need coaches, but also
Totally.
as coaches, and we'll talk about your coaching as well, because I definitely want to get to that. As coaches, you know, all three of us sitting here, in order for us to continue to progress, we need to continue our education, and that can look a million different ways. You know, that can be as you know, classic how you think of it, but it also can be us being coached. And I've hired all kinds of different coaches over the years, and it's what really it's the best fucking money I've ever spent, honestly.
No, it's so true. I know it's when it's service-based stuff like that too. I know people can be like, oh, you know, I don't know if I can invest the money, which I totally understand, but it's like, I can't speak highly enough about like therapy and coaching, where it's like, that's like helping you change your whole perspective on the world. And it's like, it's amazing how when you allow yourself to take in that help, how different of a person you can become, how many dreams that you thought, oh, that could never happen, they start coming true like naturally, because it's or maybe not naturally, but more easily maybe, because you're putting in that work for yourself. And I think you have to be ready for that, and you have to be in the right space to accept that, or else it won't really help. But yeah, it's a cool thing to watch and experience. Like, it's been a cool thing to experience for myself, but then also to see that in other people. It's so fun.
Yeah, I mean, a coach is there to like to be your like navigation system, you know,
Yeah.
and then to tell you how to navigate different roadblocks and all of those things. I always say you can get where you want to go by yourself. Absolutely, you can, but you're gonna have to do the hours of research and the trial and error and all of those things. So you can take the Greyhound bus. There's nothing wrong with that. You're still gonna get where you want to go. But if you want to get there more efficiently, then you should probably get on a private jet. And a private jet's going to cost a little bit more than a Greyhound bus,
Totally.
but there's nothing wrong with either of those things. And the information is not is not anything that is brand new. This is, you know, these things are things that can be researched. There's nothing that's proprietary that's in my wheelhouse. I would like there to be. I always say, if there's a magic pill, I'll be taking it and selling it.
Yeah.
And I would be rich as fuck. But
right.
with that, but the truth is that these things are all things that you can do and research yourself. But most people don't want to take that time, or don't have the time, or know exactly where to go, because if you might not, what works for one person isn't going to work for another person. We're all totally different. And I hate these fad diets, because it tells us that we just have this like one way of doing things, and that this one way should work for everybody. And also, what you're like today, in 2 months, your body could need something different. So I think that's such an important thing in my work, and I'm sure in your work. And I'd love for you to share with the class what your work is.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's so true, all of what you said. I'm just eating it up, taking it in. But yeah, so a lot of what I offer is mental and emotional coaching. So like I mentioned, I have my master's degree in psychology, and then I've done a lot of training in adverse childhood experiences, and kind of connecting the dots between adverse childhood experiences and how we operate as adults. And so a lot of what I get to do with my clients that I work with, how I describe it is, I'm kind of the person who is holding their hand and holding up a mirror. And you know, I take more of a trauma informed approach with people, where I give them a lot of choices on when to meet, what to focus on, because I think something that we've kind of lost in this culture is just the superpower of our own bodies, and how our bodies communicate to us. And I know for me, a lot of what I was taught was to like deny my body, ignore what it's trying to tell me, take a pill to fix it, and not knocking medication, because that can be really helpful. But it's just, my body was telling me all these things of like, you know, not having a cycle, you know, just different things. And I would get so angry at it. Like, come on, like, why aren't you doing what I want you to do? Why aren't you getting pregnant? Why aren't you doing whatever? And it's like, no, my body was trying to tell me like, hey girl, like, you are so overly stressed out right now. You're not eating the stuff that makes us feel good. Like, there's a lot of things going on where a baby would not thrive in this environment right now. Like, this would not be a good situation. And So what I love doing with people is helping them connect the dots of that, of learning to listen to their body cues, of like, oh, we're having big emotions right now. That's okay. You know, that's not something to get freaked out or panicked about. Let's note, what is it that our body's saying? Is it that we're getting a racing heart? Is it that we're feeling knots in our stomach? Are we having a rush in our head? Are we feeling, you know, tightness in our neck? And let's really, instead of ignoring that or shaming our bodies for feeling that way, let's try to understand why it's telling us those things and actually work with it. And so a lot of what I do is more like experiential work in that way of connecting the mind and the body. And it's so cool because then you get all of this new insight when you start listening to your body that you just don't have before you start doing that. And I know a lot of people say that, like, listen to your body and stuff, but I just wasn't taught like a clear pathway on how to do that. Like, because if you haven't been trained or you don't know what that means, it's like, what is this woo-woo stuff? Like, I don't even, how do you do that? And so that's kind of what I help clients discover is like, okay, we're having these big emotions. Let's pinpoint where those are coming from and what that trauma is that's kind of coming out. What is your body telling you about that? And then working through healing that and applying it to, like, you know, just everyday life. And so that's a little bit of what I do, but a lot of what I focus on too is just really driving home the message to people that you're like a loved and worthy human being. I don't think that message gets out enough. I think there's lots of things out there that inadvertently kind of say the opposite, right? Like, you're not doing good enough, you're not enough. And so that's something that I really try to share all the time, is that, like, you're a loved and worthy human being, not because of anything you're doing, just because you're created, you're here, and that's what makes you a worthy human being. And so so that's just a little bit about, like, the coaching I offer. Pretty much all that I do is virtual, but I live in Southern Oregon. So if people do want to meet in person, I love in-person stuff too, because there's lots of cool, like, energies and stuff that you can get that you can't quite get virtually. But so that's a little bit about what I do.
That's amazing. It sounds like a big part of what you do is teaching people how to tune into themselves more.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
how to respond.
Right. Because as kids, we're so in tune with that. Like, you watch how little kids operate, and it's like they know what to eat and when. They know, like, their circadian rhythms and, like, their sleep cycles, like, for the most part, not always, but it's like they're just so in tune with, like, being present, and it's not something that they have to work so hard for. And then over time, as we get older, there's so many structures in place that just kind of ruin that for us. And so I'm a big advocate of, like, getting back to that, of when we can tune in with ourselves and really listen and respect our bodies, that's when a lot of the other pieces kind of fall into place more naturally. If we're getting enough sleep, if we're eating what feels good to our body and you know, doing the things that it needs, then the other stuff kind of just starts to happen. And it's not so hard and clunky. Like, not saying it's not difficult to learn and it's like a new way of doing things, but it becomes more natural and like, oh, this is like how as a human I was supposed to be living this whole time. It's not this fast pace, you know, working 24/7, being online 24/7. It's like, no wonder I feel like crap. Like, I've been on my phone for most of the week. Like, of course that's not like naturally how we're supposed to be, you know? So it's really fun. And I'm still learning a ton. That's why all of my platforms are Grow with Shea, because I say this not jokingly. Like, if the day that I stop learning and growing is the day that I want to be dead. Like, I always want to be learning and trying to, you know, grow and learn new things. And so as I grow in my journey, I just want to, like, bring people along with me, and hopefully they can learn and grow with me.
That's probably a huge part of why you're so good at what you do. It's so important to be a perpetual student.
Yes.
And it really just, like, it feeds the soul too.
When it's stuff that's fun and interesting to learn about, not stuff that.
Well, yeah, I didn't give a shit about school, but
yeah, well, because it wasn't applicable.
All the shit's about nutrition.
yeah, that's where your passion is.
It's so true. Does somebody need to, like, so if somebody were to start with you, like, what kind, do they need to be at, like, a certain mindset place? Do they need to have a certain goal? Do they need to be a certain sex? You only work with women? I didn't know. I didn't ask you that before.
Yeah. No, I'm open to anybody. I really feel like the people that come to my path, like, we it's supposed to happen. And so anybody who feels like, yeah, this could be a good fit, feel free to reach out. But I just have people reach out. They can either DM me, or I have a little link on my Stan Store website where people can sign up. But I tend to have a lot of bariatric patients, just because I think of the nature, of my journey. But I'm not closed off to anybody, male, female, anybody who wants to reach out. I offer a free discovery session, with no pressure after that. If it doesn't feel like it's a good fit, like I'm never offended by that. It's kind of like dating. That's what I tell people, like with therapists or coaches, like you have to kind of date and figure out if this is going to be a good fit. And you could have the best coach and the best client, and they might just not be compatible, and that's okay. And so that's why I do, a discovery session beforehand, and just kind of leave it open of like, if this isn't a good fit, that's totally fine. And then we just kind of go from there.
Yeah, it's no fun for anybody if it's not a good fit.
No, if you're just trying to force it, it's like, and again, I think sometimes people will be like, oh, it must be because I'm not a good client or I'm not a good coach. It's like, I think just certain people aren't compatible, and that's okay. Like, it's not because one person is good or bad or anything like that.
Yeah, whenever I'm on a call, I say, listen, if I'm not your flavor, that's okay. I can refer you to other great coaches. I've got no problem with that. I want you, and this is what we were talking about on the last podcast too, that everybody gets so focused, or I find that a big part of our industry is so focused on making money, and it's so ridiculous.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That is not why we're here. We're here to help people. Like, yes, we need to eat, but our goal is not to be like scamming people. We want to genuinely help you. And I always say I'm not a boot camp coach, because first of all, I don't think it's an effective way of helping people.
Yep.
We're teaching them or keeping an open line of communication. But second of all, what a miserable bitch I would be if I was just screaming at people all day and telling them they weren't good enough. I'm like, no. But if somebody wants that flavor, that's so cool. It's just not mine.
I know, that's what I say a lot. I'm like, the way that I do coaching is kind of different than like other approaches in that way. Cause I used to think that, oh yeah, I need more of that like shaming boot camp coach kind of mentality to like for me to work hard. And then I found, just learning myself more, it's like, oh my gosh, that's so not my vibe. Like, I need somebody to be like supportive and encouraging and non-shaming. And even you look at research with like shaming approaches, like they really aren't as effective. Like, they can maybe make people afraid and kind of respond temporarily, but not for a long-term thing. Connection and kindness and empathy, that's really what helps people grow and get better. It's not, shaming and blaming and getting angry. And you see that a lot in like child development research too, which is really interesting.
So one word that comes up a lot, I'm sure, and in your seat as well, is motivation. What do you say when people say things to you like, I just can't get motivated? What are your words of advice?
I often wonder if it's not motivation, but if it's more of a self-worth thing. I think that's primarily what I see a lot. I saw this within myself. I see this a lot with my clients, that it's not that people are having a difficult time being motivated. It's more that they don't think they're worthy of good things. And so it's almost like a self-punishing thing. And a lot of times it's not super overt. Like it's not like, oh yeah, I'm trying to punish myself by eating these certain foods or by, doing X, Y, and Z. It's something that's really deeply rooted. And it took a therapist who said it to me one time of like, wow, like you sound like you're very self-punishing. And it was like, oh, that's such a like harsh way to say that. Like, I don't hate myself. Like, I'm not punishing myself. But then thinking about it, it's like, yeah, I had all these beliefs that, again, weren't super front of mind, but were like buried very deep of like, I'm not worthy to eat food, healthy food that will make my body feel good. I'm not worthy of having a body that can move and, move with ease. I'm not worthy of having a clean and tidy space. And all these beliefs that I had so deeply ingrained, those are the things that I try to help people with, because that's where I think it comes from. And also too, I think not having a lot of self-compassion, because again, I think people can just be so hard on themselves of like, oh, I'm not motivated or I'm not consistent enough. But it's like, okay, well, for women, like, where are you at in your cycle? First of all, that's like a huge thing to kind of like know. oh, you're like, premenstrual, you're about to start your period. Like, you probably need to like not be doing as much stuff as what you're doing right now. Like, I think you have too high of expectations for yourself. Like, I think maybe you need to adjust that a little bit. And again, I think that's something that I'm learning a bit more of, like how to work with my cycle. I'm not designed to be productive 24/7. Like, especially with how our cycles are, there's different seasons for different reasons. But when you grow up in a society that's more male dominated, especially more in like the workforce, they have 24-hour cycles where it's like it's different for them than it is for us. But when you're trying to mold yourself in more of, I'm kind of going on a little tangent here, but going, working that same type of schedule or being in that corporate environment that doesn't allow for fluidity and kind of working with your body, nobody's, or like I couldn't be motivated with that. Like, so I've just found the more self-compassion I have, the more understanding of working with my body, knowing that I'm worthy of good things, that's what's contributed to outcomes or goals that I've put out in myself. It's not because I've just been like an unmotivated person. It's because I haven't understood myself. I haven't understood information. And so learning about that has been really helpful.
I think I had a lot of this similar. It was funny. You kept describing things, and I was like, "That was me." Yep, yep, right on it. And I think that a lot of those "I am" statements can get to us too.
Yeah. No, it's so true. It's a journey. And I think that's been a funny like grieving process for me too, of like, cause again, this was something I had deep rooted, not so much front of mind, but it's like, I thought, oh, once I lose all the weight, like all my problems will be solved. Like, it's been something I've been working for such a long time. And I know. And so it's been a grieving process of like, oh wow, like life is still hard. Things are still hard. And it's always going to be like that, which is like kind of sad and like disturbing almost in a way of like, wow, life is just always going to be hard in different ways. But then it's like, okay, I can have that expectation and just have it in kind of a different way now, and come to terms with it more and accept it and just be kinder to myself in the process of that. But lots of grieving in this time for sure. And that's been one of the biggest things.
And it so is a process. And I think Jess and my husband are probably the only people that know this. And now I'm just going to tell everybody that even this many years later, like I have extreme body dysmorphia. I still have a lot of stuff to work through. And I went through I went through a honeymoon period for like a couple, like not post bariatric surgery. Sure. That's a honeymoon for everybody. Then I like hit my wall where I was like starving myself and exercising too crazy. Started with my coach, was feeling pretty good about myself. Then I probably went through like when I met my husband, I had like 2 years of like feeling good about myself. And then recently it's like come back around. And for me, that's so frustrating because I'm like, A, this is like what I fucking do for a living. But B, it's like, when does it end? And the answer is that it's never going to end. I'm just going to have to learn to keep acquiring tools to learn how to navigate these things better. But it's been a doozy, and Jess gets some very weepy text messages from me sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's crazy that even this far out that it's like, and I feel like a huge reason is because I didn't do all of the mental work at all. I was very focused on vanity, always have been. And because I didn't do any of the mindset stuff, I really think that that's why it has such an impact on me still.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, everything you're saying is stuff I've heard from lots of different people and have experienced myself as well. And I think that's also something that's helpful, is just knowing like you're not alone with that. Like it's a normal thing that a lot of people feel and experience. And the other thing that I try to encourage people in is just really like sitting in those emotions. And I think that's something that, again, we were taught a lot, is like to, any emotion that makes you feel squirmy and not good. It's like, okay, what can we do to get out of that emotion or run away from it or not deal with it or not be in it? And it's been really hard over the last couple of years, but I've really tried to just embrace those more and just go, this is just a season that sucks ass right now. Like, and just being present in that of like, I'm really sad. I don't feel good about myself. I don't feel like a worthy person or whatever it is. Right. And I think sometimes, at least I know I did, I used to be so afraid of saying those things out loud or acknowledging them, because then I would be like, oh, I'm not being positive, or I'm going to get myself in a negative headspace. But what I found for myself, and also what research supports more in like that shame kind of category is the more that we acknowledge and are present with what is, instead of trying to change it or skirt around it or go outside of it, it feels so much better, because then we can, seek connection from people, seek validation of like, yeah, what I'm feeling I'm not crazy. I'm not alone. This is something that makes sense. And it just kind of sucks right now. And there's not anything that anybody can do to fix it. I can't fix it. And it's not that you have to stay in that place forever, but I think so many of us skip that piece, and that's such an important piece of emotions, is just sitting in them sometimes, and it's so uncomfortable. And again, working in like with my own personal therapy and working with my therapist and stuff, it's like there were so many times where I'm like, this feels so uncomfortable. I don't want to do this right now. And it's okay to acknowledge those things as you're going through it and just be like, this just sucks right now, and it's okay.
It's hard. I feel like a lot of the time that I don't have a right to feel that way because I am really petite. And so I think that's a really hard thing, and that's why I don't talk about it, because I feel like a lot of people will like, put their nose up at me, like, what is she talking about? Because I know what other people perceive me as, but I don't always see myself that way. And it's a big challenge. And this is literally the first time I've ever brought it up. And I haven't even talked, in check-ins or any of that, because I feel like people will look at me like, why does she feel like this?
I think though too, like just a different perspective, maybe. I think people would also see it as like a relief too, in a way of like, oh, she has these same issues that I have too. And it doesn't discount your expertise and like all of the amazing stuff you have to offer. Like it just validates it even more, because you're a human too. And that's something like I feel like I used to show up in such a performative way a lot of times, where I would have this mask on and I thought, oh, if people saw like all the stuff that I was really struggling with, it's like they would know I'm like a fake person, or I don't know, like all of these like narratives that I would create in my own head, right? And the funny thing is, I've had people now give me feedback who I'm close with who are like, when you would show up that way, I would feel really uncomfortable because I felt like you weren't a normal human. And so I felt like I had to show up in this like performative way, and it was uncomfortable. And so I don't know, I think there's so much beauty in that vulnerability of just being like, yeah, I'm having a really hard time right now. And you are too. Like, hey, we're in the same boat with that. And it doesn't, I don't feel like it disinvalidates all that you have to offer. I feel like it just enhances it even more,
I love that. And I love you for saying that. That's a totally different perspective. And I really haven't given anybody the opportunity, except for when I'm like really down on myself and talking to Jess. I'm not in a listening place usually.
Sure.
Well, I'm going to skip you to our favorite question that we ask everybody.
Ooh, yay. Okay. I'm ready.
Closing thoughts. If there was one food that you could have for the rest of your life that would be calorie free, what would that food be?
Oh, I love food. So this is a hard one. I'm going to say I have a couple oh gosh, this was harder than I was expecting. I thought it was going to be like something about emotions and like, ooey gooey stuff. And then you bring it to food.
We had to lighten it up after that last conversation.
Right. I'm going to say brownies. I love brownies.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I feel like in a minute.
And I feel like I could just eat brownies every day and I'd be happy. Like, certain desserts, it's like every once, or foods in general, it's like every once in a while, or like I'll get a craving. Brownies, I could eat them every day and I'd be happy. So that's what I'm going to go with.
You're the first person that's gone sweet in a while. I think.
Really?
Yeah, I usually get like pizza, mac and cheese, like that's the direction.
Okay.
I'm just doing this brownie answer.
I was gonna say ice cream too, but I feel like I'm not always in an ice cream mood. But brownies, I was thinking like I could do that anytime. If anybody's like, you want a brownie, I'd most likely always say yes. So that's why I thought.
Awesome. Well, Shea, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Sorry for the little issue in the beginning there.
Oh, we're good. We made it.
Or give us an idea. Tell us where people can find you, follow you, reach out to you, all of the things.
Yeah. So on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, I'm at Grow with Shea, GROW with SHEA, Shea as in shea butter. And yeah, reach out anytime. I love when people reach out and ask questions and talk. And I'm most active on Instagram and YouTube. I try to be involved with TikTok, and there's so many great people on there, but it just kind of overwhelms me. So I'm not on there like as much, but I post on YouTube often and Instagram. But yeah, reach out anytime if you have questions or if there's things I can do to like support and celebrate with you. I love when people will reach out and be like, I just had surgery and, you know, I'm so excited about this non-scale victory or this thing that happened. I always feel very honored when people choose to share stuff with me. So reach out anytime.
Yeah, and for real, like she means that, and she's so sweet and so quick to answer and all of the things. So don't be shy if anybody wants to reach out to her. But if you are a current client and you just want her contact information, you can reach out to me. I'm happy to be the liaison for that also. But Shay's awesome, and as you guys all heard in the past hour.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad I got to connect with you both.
Yeah, and I'm glad I got to introduce you to as well.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Been There, Lost That podcast. I wish I could remember my podcast name. Our motto here is do it right, so you only have to do it once. If you're looking for personalized and customized programming to reach and sustain your health and fitness goals, check us out at teamfitwithme.com.